Welcome back to the Foundation in C# course. We are currently in Module 3, and in this lesson, we're going to cover advanced breakpoints. This is a lot of fun because breakpoints, like I said earlier, are very, very important to helping us debug. And debugging is one of the most important skills you can learn as a developer. Therefore, this will really help you get a leg up in making sure your debugging skills are as good as they can get. So let's open up Visual Studio and go File, New Project. So Windows Desktop, Console Application, Console UI, Advanced Breakpoints Demo. And let's put this in D:\demos. I hit OK. And when we're done here, we can say console.readline at the end. Now, you may not have caught that, and you may not have heard me say it earlier, but there is not a snippet for readline. So I can't say like CR and have a snippet. But if I type console, then hit dot, then I have the option of finding readline in this list. I could just scroll, find it, click on it. But the other option I have is readline has two capital letters in it, R and L. If I type capital R, capital L, it says, oh, do you mean readline? So it says there's only one match here for R and L. Now, if I do something else that may have a similar match, then I might get two in that list. But with this, like just at R, it highlights all the ones that have R, but there's others that have R in there somewhere. So this way, it takes me right to what I want to do, and I can get, and there's a case where there's three different options, but at least it narrows it down really quickly. So for me, I just hit RL and tab, because that finds the only entry, readline, and then tab fills it in. So just one of those helpful, quick hits that can make your programming a little faster. All right, so let's create a method. We get private static void runs a lot. This method is called the runs a lot method. For I equals 0, I is less than, let's say 1,000. And in fact, we're going to say negative 1,000. So for I equals negative 1,000 to less than 1,000, let's say less than or equal to 1,000, so it's even, it's going to loop through and do something. Okay? So maybe what it will do is it will say, let's do a long, just in case we have a story. I'm going to start at negative 1,000 and go through 1,000, which means in the middle there is 0. 5 divided by 0 is an exception. But let's pretend we don't know that. That'll help us with our debugging later. So let's call the runs a lot method. And let's at the end of this, before we do a console write line that says $sign for a string interpolation and says the total is, and I have no clue what the total will be, but let's find out. All right, so let's run this after we paste it up here and call it. We go to run it, and it immediately throws an exception. And there's nothing on the screen. Now that's fine in programming, in code, because if it stops right on the line where it stops. We can investigate the values I0. So 5 divided by 0, that's the divide by 0 exception. But what if this whole thing, maybe just this right here, we say, no, that might be a problem. So we say, you know what? We're going to surround with a try. We're going to catch the exception, but just say catch. We're not actually going to do anything with it. And we're going to say there was an exception. Okay? Now, that's a horrible message because it tells us nothing about why it happened or what was going on. Also notice I didn't even say exception here because I say, you know what? The catch without anything means catch everything. So if we run this now, it says there was an exception and the total is 0. Well, that's kind of weird. What's going on here? All right. So why is this happening? Why do we get this message? Where does it happen? We don't know. Now we could put a breakpoint in here. Let's do that. Let's put a breakpoint right there, right inside our for loop. We run, it hits the breakpoint. The I is, let's look at the value, it's negative 1,000. So we step through, and that works. We go again. Do you want to do this for 2,000 iterations? Or 20,000 or 200,000? No, we do not. I could hit play here. It goes to the next one, the next one, the next one. And if I kept doing this or hitting F5 to continue, it would keep going. And probably what happens is I would get so bored, I'd hold my finger down, the F5 key, and it'd blaze through, and then throw an exception, and I have no clue where it was. That's annoying. So that's not what I want either. Now, I could take off the catch and change my code. But if I do that, then I have to put it back when it goes into production. Because this is, in theory, this is the intended code. Now, again, like I said, it's not great code, but maybe that's what was intended. So we don't want to change it just for our debugging purposes. Because at that point, if we don't remember to take that code out, the testing code out, then it might go to production with testing code in it, which, first of all, is ugly. Second of all, it gives hackers more information than we want, and it could cause extra problems as well. So that's not a good solution. So what are our other options here? And this is where the advanced breakpoints and other debugging tools come into play. So if I put my breakpoint back where it was, if you right-click on the breakpoint itself, notice there's other options. Well, first of all, delete breakpoint. Okay, we got that. You could have just clicked again, it would have gone away. You can disable this breakpoint. If we do that, it becomes an empty circle, which indicates that, yeah, there's a breakpoint here, but it's not going to pause. That's helpful if you want to, keep the breakpoint there, but not actually have it hit for a little bit while you're testing. So we'll enable that again. Other options, though, are conditions, actions, labels, and export. Let's look at these in order. So conditions. So a condition says that this breakpoint will only stop the code if this is true. Okay? So if an expression is true, or if a hit counter has the correct value, or if there's a filter. The one you'll use the least is the filter. It's only there really for some advanced stuff that you might be doing. So, for example, you can filter on machine name or process ID or process name or thread ID or thread name. The likelihood of you needing to do that is remote. Okay, that's a small percentage. So we're not going to cover that because it's just way too advanced to get into, what thread are you on? We're not doing multi-threading at this point. But hit count. We could say, well, you know what? After a certain number of times you've been hit, then pause. Or we can say conditional expression, when I is a certain value. And that's true or when changed. All right? So, right away, I see a couple different options we can do. The first one is the hit count. And it's equal to or is a multiple of. So maybe, since we have 2,000 values to go through from negative 1,000 to 1,000, what if we said, you know what, let's do a multiple of 100. Because that way, we're only skipping over and we know then the range is at 100 to 200, 200 to 300. Where is it there that we want, that's the problem? So it makes it a lot faster. We can skip over a group and then we know the range it's in. We can start dialing it in. Let's try that first. All right, so I'm going to hit enter there and it's been saved. Now I could do another condition or an action, but we'll get back to those later. So let's just close this out. Now, my breakpoint is a red circle with a white plus in the middle. That means it's a counter breakpoint, meaning it's counting up or only hitting in certain circumstances. So let's run this again, and we hit our breakpoint. What's the value of I? If we look down here, the value of I is negative 901. And it's still working. Now the value of I is negative 801, still working. 701, still working. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 101, negative 1, it's still working. Let's hit it again. And it's still working, but I noticed in the screen that's popped up, there was an exception. So the exception happens between negative 1 and positive 99. Now what I can do is stop the code, go back to my breakpoint, go back to conditions. I can clear out this condition and add a new condition and say that I is greater than negative 1. You're going to pause, okay? So now that picks up where we know the problem is in that range of 100. So now we hit it, and it says the value of I is 0. Well, actually, no, that's the one that's the problem. But in this case, what I could do is I could hit continue, and it immediately threw that exception. But if it didn't, I could, let's pretend, since it makes it a little bit easier to understand. Let's say it's negative 10 instead. That was the lower end of our scale. So if I do that and I hit this breakpoint, it's negative 9. So if I hit continue, it's negative 8, 7, 6, 5. I only have to do this 100 times maximum. Probably less than that. I could have dialed it in even more if I wanted to. So 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. I run it again, and when it was 0, that was the exception. Okay, so that's one way of dialing in this whole long list by using this filter. Now, another thing I could have done is I could have said Well, let's say that the hit count is equal to, let's say, every 10, and conditional expression is true, I is greater than negative, let's just say negative 10 again. Let's pretend that's a lower boundary of our area. We did it by hundreds. Now you could dial it in by tens and say, well, start at negative 10 and then work your way up by tens. And they could do it again and say, well, actually now I want you to do it by twos or by fives until you dial it in very quickly to just the ones you want. So by hundreds, I only had 20 to hit. And then by tens, I only had a maximum of 10 to hit. And then by fives, I'd only have a maximum of 2 to hit. I mean, you could just really dial it in and then just do a couple more. So that's one way of going about it. I could also guess, because with debugging, that's a valid option. I could say, you know what? I think it's when I equals 0. I think that's the problem. So you know what? Let's try that one and see what happens. So I hit start. There's no counter was a multiple of 50. Okay, so we can kind of put those two together. Notice we can actually put values in here. It's just typing. So if I said action and I typed the value of I is, I have to use my curly braces and then put I. And those curly braces work just kind of like a string interpolation, where whatever's inside the curly braces is actual C# code. If you wonder what you could do, hover over this question or this information box, and it tells you all the different options you can do and how to format your strings. So I hit enter to complete that. And now I also have an option here. Do I want to continue execution or not? I could pause at this point, or I could let it just continue, which means this breakpoint won't really stop. It will just put some of the window and keep going, which is great for if you want to put like different test statements in different places. It used to be we'd write actual code. But again, the problem with that is you're changing production code with test stuff that might go into production accidentally and cause problems. With this, you can use your breakpoints to put those conditional statements in, or those test statements, and just log it to your output window. So let's run this. Runs through the whole thing, and of course it gets the exception, it gives us our total. But if we look at the output window, view, output, notice, and let's just kind of make this a little bigger. It's got a whole bunch of values in here. The value of I is negative 951 all the way through down. There's our exception. And then the values go up. Also notice, since that exception gets put to the output window, we know where it is in the list because we have the numbered values. Now we're only doing 50s, so it's in this 50s range somewhere. But if we put every 1, there'd be a lot in the output window, but it would tell us exactly where it was that the exception occurred. All right, so that was the view output window, which is right here. Now also notice, because this has an action, it's got the diamond shape box, and it also has a plus in there because it's only doing it on a certain number of iterations, in this case, every 50. So again, these things do tell you more information about what's going on. Now, before I get to the next one, which is labels, I want to kind of show you where you'd see it first. And that's the breakpoints window. Let's pin that. Now, this window isn't open by default. So if you go to the debug menu, the very first option is Windows. Inside there is the breakpoints window. Click that, and then you have the ability to see all of your breakpoints in your application. So if I scatter some more throughout here, like so, you can see all of my list of breakpoints. Now notice that one of them is not like the other. The hit count says break always for most of them, but this one says when hit count is a multiple of 50. That's kind of helpful. But the other thing you can do here is you can actually label your breakpoints, kind of group them together. So we could right click on this breakpoint, say edit labels, and say, you know what, this is a, let's just call it a value check. Notice down here it says value check. And here we're going to edit labels and just check that box. So now they're both value checks. But down here we're going to change this one to say, nope, this one is a output info. And so is this one. All right, so now this list, I can sort by the label. So I can say, okay, these two are the ones that I really want. All right, and you can say, well, I'm going to edit these labels. I'm going to delete just these ones. Hit OK. That's going to put a breakpoint on runs a lot. If I run this, notice it paused right here. I didn't put that breakpoint there manually. It said, oh, well, that's the runs a lot breakpoint. So that's why we stopped there. Okay, it's not there now, but because it matches runs a lot, it's going to put a breakpoint there. And that's the function breakpoint. Okay, let's go ahead and delete that. Now, maybe there's a case where you say, you know what, we want to export our breakpoints so I can give them to somebody else to try out. So I'm working on a problem and I'm just not getting it. And my buddy says, you know what, how about I give you a hand? How about I look at the source code too, and try and figure it out. And I said, okay, great. I tell you what, I'll give you all my breakpoints so you can see where I'm looking and you can have all the setup I've already gone through to get to this point. In that case, what you do is you use this, what looks almost like a undo or redo button, but it's right here. This button right there says export all breakpoints matching the current search criteria. In this case, all of them, but if I had searched for some, I could export just a subset. So I can say export, and let's go to d:/demo. Demos, sorry. Advanced breakpoints, and just save it here under our breakpoints. Okay? Now, if we are our friend does not have any of these breakpoints. And it says, hey, you sure you want to delete all these? Yep. They're all gone, right? So I have no breakpoints. And this is, similarly my friend comes in and goes, oh, you sent me this file. I'll use this right here, the import breakpoints icon. And I'll go and find that XML file that you sent to me. And look at that. Now I have all the breakpoints. Now, obviously, your code has to match. If you have totally different code, that's not going to work real well. But in this case, since we have the same code, it allows us to bring the breakpoints back. This also allows you to save out pieces and say, you know what? That was a really helpful set of breakpoints for finding that weird data error. Maybe I'll save those for next time. And you can do that, export them, and then you can clear them out so you don't have them clogging up your code. Okay, so that's another thing you can do with breakpoints. At the end of the day, your most common breakpoint is the simple breakpoint. Just click it, pause your code at that spot when you're running, and step through the code. But these advanced breakpoints can really be helpful in tracking what's going on with your application. It may be, let's delete them all. It may be that you just create the monitoring style breakpoint where you say, you know what, I just want an action that logs a message that says, let's just say what the line is. Like that. And then you know every time that line gets hit. So if we run this application, you look at the output window, you see every time that line's been hit. Now, obviously, with one line, that's not really helpful. But if you use these breakpoints all over, you can kind of see the flow of your application without having to step through it slowly. You can watch what happens. Maybe you put the value of I in there every time. And so you kind of see what's going on and see where your application stops or where a value pops up that you weren't expecting. You can read through those logs, and then from there, you can understand what to do next as far as your debugging process. And you can disable certain ones and then put different ones in place and go from there. So the breakpoint tooling system in Visual Studio is very, very helpful in helping us debug. The key is to understand what it can do and take full advantage of its power. All right, and that brings us to our tip, which is use advanced breakpoints to help you narrow down issues and finally find the location of your error. From there, it's a matter of using your logic to fix the faulty code or fix the bad data. But use your advanced breakpoints to help you narrow down finding where that is. Now, in simple applications, a simple breakpoint probably works best, because there's not a lot going on. You can step through it very easily. There's only 10, 15, 30 steps in your entire application. But when an application gets much larger, using advanced breakpoints helps you narrow down where you're looking and finally dial into a specific area or a specific set of data or something like that, where you can then be more specific and not waste your time on stuff that's working. All right, so that's advanced breakpoints. Your homework for today is to create a console application that loops from 1 to 100 and then throw an exception on 73. So just have an if statement in there that says, if I equals 73, throw new exception. Doesn't have to be a special exception, just throw an exception. And then use a breakpoint to break before the breaking situation. So get right up to the exception, but not throw it. Use your advanced breakpoints to do so and kind of get used to how they work. Okay? That's it. Once you're done with that, come on back for the next lesson.